All right, well, let's take a look at some of these teams, some of these classes, and sort of the questions that come out of it. I want to begin with the LSU Tigers because LSU is number 1 on the transfer portal team rankings. 16 commits in the portal class, an average player rating of 90.47. The LSU transfer portal experience storyline last season was that they got a lot of guys on campus and they were not able to bring as many of those guys on. You remember Brian Kelly has the sit-down report with local media, the sit-down interview with local media. He says, we're not buying players. And, that got a lot of pushback, especially given the current NIL era that we're in. This LSU team was in the mix for the college football playoff and the SEC championship in the middle of October. And the 3-game losing streak hits, and you got a lot of frustration coming out of that. But this is still an LSU team that every year under Brian Kelly has had a shot. He's got to win a season opener. He hadn't done that yet. But they are a Tigers team that to me is meeting expectations. When we look at this portal class, do you think that they did a better job of being able to identify places where they got their needs and hit on those needs?
Well, yes. And also, Brian Kelly's comments last year were, I won't say disingenuous, but they were clearly trying to save their money for their high school class, which then summarily fell apart, right? Yeah. Michigan bought Bryce Underwood with Oracle. And so LSU all of a sudden had a bunch of cash, to splash the pot. And if Brian Kelly doesn't win this year, I'm pretty sure he's going to get fired. So you kind of need to be all in, like the whole building for the future with high school stuff. Like if you're LSU, you're like, yeah, we need to go in hardcore right now and get as much talent as you can. I thought LSU did a really nice job. And you can't waste 2 years of Jalen Daniels, and then not to say that Nussmeier is better than Daniels, but if you waste 2 years of Jalen Daniels or Jaden Daniels and you waste 2 years of Nussmeier, why shouldn't you be fired? That's pretty egregious. So I think they need to really go all in and make sure they're supporting their quarterback because they probably don't have another one waiting in the wings.
I think you've said this a couple times, and I was a little bit skeptical first about teams cycling, when they're going to go all in, when they're going to spend in certain off seasons, and when they're going to dial it back and save up for potentially the next season. We talked about with Auburn kind of saving before when they realized they didn't have something. I think this is the school, the example. And I would say if you have a top 15 quarterback, which he's probably stronger than that, he's probably a top 5 quarterback preseason, that you want to try to win. You want to try to go all in like you're talking about. So I think absolutely this is one of those examples where LSU feels like they have an opportunity to bring one home, and they're going to do everything they can and spend everything they can in order to try to do it.
Michael Van Buren waiting in the wings. Totally love the take because I think he's a guy who's proven he can play a little bit, but he certainly didn't play at an amazing level. And I'd be pretty surprised if he's actually as good as Nussmeier. So yes, it's like a nice quality building piece, but let's be real here. Your window to win may be closing a little bit unless you really get things going. So,
do you know what I like about
the
this?
chat's mad about Patrick Payton's ranking. Look, based on how he played last year at FSU, I completely agree. He acted like he'd already made it, and then I bet you got his NFL draft stuff, and it was 5th, 6th undrafted level because he played terribly last year. But he also played really well in 23. So
is
got
he
to
still
the best defensive line in the country?
Yeah.
Is he still?
And was
6'5",
it because he was playing
250?
with Fisk and with Jared Verse, or is it or is it because he mailed it in because he was paid last year? That those are valid questions.
Mm-hmm.
Probably both.
Yeah, a little bit. I like the wide receivers here because was CJ Daniels a miss, or do you think that he just never really pulled it together? The Liberty wide receiver that we were looking at, because when you lose Brian Thomas, when you lose Malik Neighbors, we knew that Kyron Lacey was going to be a big part of that passing attack. But man, watching LSU last year, it did seem that there was just not the depth of really big time game changers. You get Nick Anderson from Oklahoma, who has dealt with his own health issues in terms of being able to stay on the field. But then Berrien Brown from Kentucky, that's another dynamic talent right there. I like the tools that they were able to get to go and get that for Garrett Nussmeier. That's probably the one thing from this class that stands out to me.
The CJ Daniels thing, the Liberty offense, first of all, you have to look at the players they were going against. But also the Liberty offense is so simple. And the LSU offense, not overly complicated, but a bit more complex than what they were running at Liberty. And maybe CJ Daniels just had trouble adapting to the new offense while also facing a much higher quality of competition.
Fair.
As far as who they did get, I think Berrien Brown's the most underrated player in their class. I loved Berrien Brown at Kentucky. I think he's going to be a stud in that offense.
They also really needed to revamp that O-line. I mean, that was one of the reasons why I was like, why are you not going all in this year? With that O-line, like, you should be trying to build around that and make a run. And the SEC was very gettable this year, and they failed to take advantage of that, which, of course, because you're having to allocate a lot of your money towards Bryce and the high school kids, they ended up losing. I get it. Like, you're trying to think longer term. I don't really completely fault them for that, but when they kind of got to recognize, like, got to win now, and they're losing a whole bunch of good offensive linemen to the league. So we'll see if they have done a good job of rebuilding it, but I think they have. At least guys who have shown they can play, and maybe there won't be an enormous drop-off.